And this radio program is intended to be for informational purposes only. This information does not constitute legal advice. The law constantly changes. The information may not be complete or correct depending on the date and your particular legal problem. Each legal problem depends on its individual facts, and different jurisdictions have different laws and regulations. Because of these differences, you should not act or rely on any information in this segment without seeking the advice of a competent attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction for your particular problem. And he is, again, joining us here on the air. Marshall Chriswell, good morning again.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Now, a lot of folks want to know, what is Marshall Chriswell? What's he doing with his time right now, since we're all locked in? But the work goes on, doesn't it?
Well, it does. It does. This morning, I'm at home with a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I apologize for any background noise. But for the
your
most
law
part,
clerks are getting younger all the time, huh?
Yeah. But for the most part, yeah, staying busy. One thing that I've been getting a lot of calls about are our estate plans. People are still thinking about, making those plans and wondering if we can put them in place. And the answer is, that I can, I have phone consultations, I can do video conferencing, and we can put together, our estate plans. To this point, the issue we were having with getting them, signed, executed properly, was the notary public requirement. The notary and the witnesses, everybody's got to be in the same room when you sign these documents. And, of course, our social distancing rules are prohibiting that. But we got some relief late last week. The governor's office, through the Department of State, issued an advisory on Friday that we are going to be able to start doing remote notarizations for wills, financial powers of attorney, healthcare powers of attorney, advance directives, temporary guardianships, things like that. So that's a big help, because I've got lots of work in the pipeline and people that wanted to get these documents put in place, but we couldn't do that. So this week we'll start looking at the details and the requirements of that remote notarization plan and putting that in place.
Does that increase at this time of the year due to the tax date, even though the tax date is extended this year, or is it just something that is sort of a constant flow of folks that want to get their estate plans updated?
It's a constant flow. People, I don't know if there's any kind of, maybe around New Year's resolutions is a time of year when people start to think about estate planning, but it's more driven by what's going on in people's lives. I see more people, the thinking about estate planning whenever they've experienced a loss, particularly in their family. You lose a family member, a sibling, a spouse. And then you realize what the impact of not having a good plan is. So it's more driven by what happens in an individual's life, I think, than any annual event like tax day. Okay.
I want to move on to something else. With COVID-19, the SBA loans, the various other legal issues that small business people particularly get involved in, but everybody in general, you must have an awful lot of work having to do with that as well, don't you?
I do. I have small business clients. I have nonprofit clients that obviously are put in a real financial bind by the COVID-19 crisis, and obviously that's something that's everywhere. And the federal government has realized that and signed pushed through the CARES Act, which provides for one about $350 billion in funding for payroll and other related expenses for small businesses. So what those applications were just started to be accepted by banks on Friday for what's called the Paycheck protection program, where small businesses can obtain loans, and these are forgivable loans. They can end up being essentially grants in the amount of 2.5% 2.5 times your normal 8-week payroll cost. So, and as long as you keep people on the payroll through June 1st, or by June 1st, you have the same amount of people on payroll as you did prior to the crisis, these loans are forgivable, and they're up to $10 million. So these are for not only for small businesses, but for medium and larger businesses as well, to keep afloat during this time.
Yeah. Businesses, you don't want to try to tackle all that yourself, though. You should have an attorney that is able to guide you through that process, yes?
So what's happening is the statute was enacted, the law was enacted very, very quickly, and banks are having a very difficult time understanding the guidelines. The Small Business Administration is pushing out advisories. It seems like almost on a daily basis. There was an interim final rule entered late Thursday night for these applications that were due on Friday. So I've been keeping on top of all these things, and absolutely, if you have an attorney who works with small businesses, you want to talk to them about what these requirements are and how you can maximize what you're able to obtain through this funding. You know, I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize is there's funding if you're a sole proprietor. There's funding there that not only for if you have employees, so your people that you have on payroll, but if you're organized as a sole proprietorship, you can get a forgivable loan for your own pay, for your own net income to keep you going as well. So it's absolutely talking to somebody who's reviewed the law and has kept abreast of the kind of rapid changes that go along with it.
The way this situation changes minute by minute, it seems there have to be a ton of legal issues that come up that, through no fault of the people involved, they have to be answered. I'm thinking of rental agreements, those sorts of things, businesses and the various obligations they have to pay their suppliers and everything. And there are certain legal protections or ways that you can shield yourself from some of the most devastating ramifications, and I would assume that you would be someone to contact in those cases as well to help navigate through all these troubling issues.
Yeah, this is really impacting every part of our society, and so it has legal ramifications in every aspect as well. You mentioned rental agreements, so the like many states have, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has issued an order putting a stay on evictions. So I've gotten calls from both landlords and tenants saying, "Hey, what does that mean?" And what that means is that in the event you have a tenant who is behind on rent, you can't have them evicted until this order is lifted. You can file a complaint. A landlord can file a complaint with a district judge and obtain an order for possession, but constables and district magistrates are not permitted to move forward with evictions. So that's very obviously a huge relief for many tenants who are out of work right now, and it's while most landlords that I've talked to are understanding. There's also consternation there because that's their income and their livelihood. So, that is in place. And then these other things, talking about businesses and suppliers and contracts. I've seen a lot of issues with event contracts. People that have weddings and other special events planned, and they've got contracts for those. And there's disputes about who keeps the deposit, and can we get this rescheduled, and those kinds of things. And you got to look at it on a contract by contract basis from a pure legal analysis as far as what's in there. As far as is there what's called a force majeure clause, saying that if something is an act of God, are the obligations under this contract relieved at that point, and does that include something like a pandemic disease? Because normally you were just thinking of something like an earthquake, a flood, a fire. After 9/11, they all have terrorism. A lot of these standard clauses have terrorism provisions in them. But a pandemic is something that maybe wasn't considered.
Yeah. Hey, a couple of weeks when you were on the air with us, and maybe you can give us an update on it, you were talking about the possible child custody and those sorts of issues that come up now as well that maybe have a whole new angle to them. Are there any changes in what you told us a couple of weeks ago?
You broke up on me a little bit. I think you were talking about the child custody.
Yes.
As far as the law that was proposed to provide a presumption of 50-50 custody in every custody case.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that is on hold, like so many things in the legislature are right now, because it is COVID-19 all the time, it seems like.
Yeah.
And so that hasn't there hasn't been any further action. That law was referred to a committee, and it hasn't moved at all yet. I know, like I said, the Pennsylvania Bar Association had opposed it. And I had been keeping tabs on it, but it hasn't moved as of yet.
But the second part of that question had to do with visitation right now in the COVID-19 area, and the possibility that somebody could be denied their right to see their child because of COVID-19. So
here's what I've been telling my clients, and I've gotten lots of calls on this. The governor's order in Pennsylvania specifically says that traveling to comply with a court order is considered essential travel. So anybody that calls me and says, my significant other isn't going to exchange custody, says that I can't have custody, they don't want to give up the kids because they're afraid to bring them out in this in this atmosphere. That's my advice to everybody is these custody orders need to be continuing unless there is a true medical reason for it not to happen. I've had a couple of cases where we've had interstate custody exchanges where there was a point when all the rest stops were shut down in Pennsylvania and some of the surrounding states. Now they've started to reopen, but to drive the children to Massachusetts through an overnight, it just wasn't going to happen. So there are. You've got to take it on a case-by-case basis, but the overarching advice that I'm giving everybody is that these custody orders need to be complied with, because once courts get back up and running, you may find yourself in contempt of court for having not, exchanged custody when you should have.
A lot of legal issues anytime, but now even more. So if somebody wants to talk to Marshall Chriswell, attorney, about them, what do they need to do?
You'd call me at 724-465-5826 or go online to www.westernpalawyer.com.
There you go. Enjoy the kids today, Marshall.
Okay, thanks a lot. Take care now.
Bye now. There is Marshall Chriswell with us here this morning on the Voice of Indiana County, WCCS AM 1160 and 101.1 FM. 1.1 FM. 1.